Welcome to Dominant Mets Nation. Welcome everyone. It is 12:30 on December 2nd. It is going into Saturday morning, and our New York Mets have seemed to pick a direction as of now. And I'm not really happy with that direction. I gotta really wait and see where David Stearns is going to go. But I gotta say, I am concerned to say the least. The least. I'm gonna go over the reasons why because I feel some of our favorite players could be at risk for going, and we're going to see very shortly what the plan is going to be for David Stern. Right now, we see some very low-level moves coming from David Stearns in this new front office. They are very low-level moves. Some utility players, backup catchers, some depth pieces. We have some options in the bullpen, but nothing of note, nothing of significance. And now we hear today that the Mets are supposedly not interested in Shohei Ohtani and Juan Soto. So what does that mean going forward for our New York Mets now and in the future? And that is something I've been pondering all day. And it's something that I've been pondering really the last couple of weeks because I've been waiting to see which direction David Stearns is going to go in. Is he going to utilize the money of Steve Cohen? Is he going to build on the payroll right now? Or is he going to break it down? He could just break this whole thing down. And I think that is going to be a possible direction, that he may just break this thing down. And if he decides to break this down, guys like Pete Alonso and maybe even Francisco Lindor may be casualties. And I was just thinking of this also. Scott Boras is a guy who's been notoriously plugged into baseball. He's been plugged into what is going on, what the rumors are, and this signal that he sent in the beginning of the offseason when he was talking about Pete Alonso and he was talking about the polar bear and that the polar bear is not going into hibernation. I'm thinking back at that. I'm like, maybe that was a signal. Maybe he heard that David Stearns and the New York Mets were really not interested in signing Pete or extending their current, players. Maybe they were more interested in rebuilding this thing. Maybe that was the indication Scott Boras had or heard or found out. And maybe that's why he's like, all right, let's put early feelers out. Let's see if we open up and say Pete wants to sign. Let's see if David Stearns sits down at the table with us. Apparently that really hasn't happened at a high level. There's been some preliminary talks, but nothing concrete as of yet. I mean, it was rumored 2 days ago. I heard on WFAN that Pete was wearing a New York or Nowhere shirt, and Evan Roberts was saying, oh, Pete's going to be signed. But I mean, these last flurry of moves by David Stearns really has me thinking that we're focusing on more of the future. And what would that look like? What would that look like if you eliminate mainstays or cornerstone like a Pete Alonso or possibly like a Francisco Lindor? I mean, Francisco Lindor is going to be 30 years old. He has 8 years left on the contract, and he's highly productive right now. But he's making $34 million a year. And is he David Stearns' guy? Does David Stearns want to build around Francisco Lindor? Or does he see other viable, cheaper options? We are in a financial mess if you look at it. Our payroll right now sits at $300 million, and we're a pretty crappy team right now. We have no pitching staff. We have one or two guys out of the bullpen. Edwin Diaz is coming back off a major surgery, and besides Edwin Diaz, we don't have really reliable options. Our lineup really seems like it consists of Pete Alonso. I know we got, Starling Marte's coming off an injury and he's 35 years old. I can't really count on him. I know we have Brandon Nimmo at the top of the lineup. And I know we got younger guys like Ronnie Mauricio coming up. But as of right now, $300 million isn't getting us far. It really isn't. Of course, we're playing Justin Verlander. Of course, we're playing Max Scherzer. But, it just seems like we're in such a crappy position. And I wouldn't be surprised if David Stearns kind of had a conversation with Steve Cohen and said, maybe the best thing to do is to blow this damn thing up. And do I want this thing to be blown up? No, I cannot sit through losing. I thought I could. When July came and I said, we were trading players away, I was like, okay, you know what? Max Scherzer's gone. Yes, we got a pretty good package back. Luis Angel Acuna, that was a good return. Then when we made the Justin Verlander trade, we got a couple good players back. Clifford and, a couple good guys back. I'm like, all right, great. We're collecting prospects. I'm happy. But we had 2 months of hell. I couldn't really take that. And if we're going to rebuild this, or if we're not going to kind of like put the foot to the pedal right now, it's going to be really tough to sell. It's going to be tough to sell New Yorkers. It's going to be tough to sell fans who are going to the stadium paying an arm and a leg. Steve Cohen better be doing some things at the stadium that's kind of like giving back to the fans, because the money you got to pay when you go to Citi Field is astronomical. Astronomical. If you're bringing a family, 2, 3, 4, 5, you better spend $400 or $500 there. It's just insane. So I mean, bottom line, you want a product on the field that is something that can entertain the fans and something that can give the fans excitement. So this is what I'm saying right now. We need a clear vision, and I believe we're going to get a clear vision. Right now, I'm a bit impatient. I'm a bit emotional because, I had hope for Shohei Ohtani to be a New York Met. I had hope to build around Shohei Ohtani, and I can understand why a guy who's approaching 30 years old, who has 2 Tommy John surgeries, who potentially one of his he's supposed to be a pitcher and a hitter, a Cy Young pitcher and an MVP hitter. And if he's not going to be at that Cy Young level, that unicorn status is not really going to be there. And he's aging. And you don't know how long even if he can pitch, you don't know how long he's going to be able to do both. Because the human body, there's been no players who can do this. Not to mention going into the 30s and doing it as they age. So I can understand why the Mets would not want to take a risk with Shohei Ohtani, especially at a valuation of $500 to $600 million. I mean, listen to that, folks. I mean, if we were going to pay him like $35, $40 million, I'd be like, okay, yeah, let's do it. But we are talking some ridiculous figures. Ridiculous. I'm hearing that, everybody reads this, $600 million for the guy, and you don't even know if he can pitch. I mean, Juan Soto got offered a contract. Mike Trout, I believe, is making $440, and Juan Soto, I got offered a contract in a couple of years, and it was about $450. I mean, Shohei Ohtani, not knowing if he could pitch, would be making $150 million more than that. Not to mention, he would be signing that contract at an older age. So, if I really think about it logically, not emotionally, I can see why the Mets wouldn't go down that route. But, I put out another video regarding the Yankees, and I said, who's going to be the new king of New York? And being the new king of New York, one of the biggest things is if there's a free agent, you sign that free agent. But it seems like we're really not in that position to put the pedal to the metal and capitalize and go forward and be a winner. David Stearns, if he wants to break this thing down to a point and build it up the right way, I can understand that. I can understand if he wants to put his imprint on the team. And if you really look at it, let's look at David Stearns. Let's delve into David Stearns. David Stearns became the president. I believe he became the general manager of the Brewers in 2015. The Brewers in 2015, folks, if you go back to that, they stunk. I believe they were like 20 games under 500, right? So in 2016, in the offseason, David Stearns made some incremental moves. He signed a couple of guys. They were very low-level moves. But it was his first year. He was 30 years old, one of the youngest. He was the youngest GM in MLB history, right? That tells you something about our general manager, what type of genius they considered him. What type of MLB mind? So they hired him at 30. In 2016, he made a couple moves. In 2016, the team improved by a couple games. In 2018, the Brewers actually were a very viable team in 2 short years. He took that team into like a 20-game under 500, and in 2018, they were very viable. Now in 2018, that's when David Stearns was pretty comfortable. He made the trade for Christian Yelich. And folks, if you look at that trade, he was able to acquire a man who was essentially an MVP player. I believe he came in second place in the MVP voting. But Christian Yelich, if you remember, in 2018 and 2019 was dominant. And who did he give up for Christian Yelich? I mean, he basically, in my opinion, he ripped the Marlins big time. I believe Jordan Yamamoto was in that trade, but nobody of significance. So what I'm telling you here is we may have to be patient. There is going to be probably a plan in place. And then we'll probably see some trades coming. I think David Stearns is going to be able to work a lot quicker than when he was a newly general manager. And when he became that general manager, the Brewers made the playoffs 5 times in his 8-year tenure. And if that doesn't sound too impressive, in the previous 30 years, the Brewers made the playoffs 2 times. They made the playoffs 2 times. So David Stearns was able to more than triple that. And I believe they came in first place 3 times in those 5 times he made the playoffs. So David Stearns is accustomed to turning things around. We just might need to give the guy some time. I don't want to give him time. I really don't. I want to win now. I figured that the fact that we have money and we have resources should speed this damn thing up so we don't have to wait years. Hopefully he'll be able to do this within a year. Hopefully. I mean, if you look at the books, I believe we got Marte on the books for 2 more years. After this year, we're going to have all those garbage contracts like Scherzer and Verlander coming off the books. So we'll be able to free up some cap. But I see David Stearns' plan possibly to reset the luxury tax next year. Possibly. So we'll be able to see if he's going to start cutting payroll. His first move of significance, signing Luis Severino, giving him $13 million. Obviously extended the payroll, and now all these little mediocre moves, they really kind of mean nothing. They're really depth pieces, but all right, it is what it is. We're gonna talk more about that, but I actually want to get into kind of Shohei Ohtani. I want to get into who's left in the sweepstakes. Who the heck is left? So I was looking at the odds. Apparently, obviously, the Dodgers, they'll have the best chance, and I don't blame him. I mean, the Dodgers, if they're going to get Shohei Ohtani, it makes all the sense in the world. The guy wants to stay on the West Coast. The Dodgers are a perennial winner. It makes sense. But here's where I kind of get upset. I'm going to read you some of the other teams who have a good shot. You have the Cubs, who, depending on which publication you look at, they may have the second or the third best odds. You have the Toronto Blue Jays in there. And the Giants kind of are believed to be a little lower. But those top, and obviously you have the Angels. So let's go over this. You have the Dodgers, you have the Blue Jays, you have the Angels. And, out of those teams, I anticipate him going to the Dodgers. I really do. I'm sorry, you have the Cubs too. So I really anticipate him going to the Dodgers. But if he goes to one of those other teams, me as a Met fan, I understand the direction the Mets are going in, but the excuse was he doesn't want to go on the West. He only wants to go on the West Coast. He doesn't want to, go on the East Coast. But if he signs with the Cubs won 82 games last year. Although they have some good up-and-coming guys, at the end of the day, it's going to make me very upset as a Met fan to see that another organization that's not on the West Coast, that's not on the Dodgers, was able to get Shohei Ohtani. Okay, and and that's what I feel. I don't even understand how these other teams like the Cubs and the Blue Jays have a chance to sign Shohei. I don't. If the guy wants to stay on the West Coast, why is he looking at Canada? Why is he looking in the Midwest? Why is he looking at Chicago? How are those teams even viable options? is it just his agent trying to use those other teams as leverage, or do those other teams present locations that he really wants to go to? I know the Cubs, they have done some really nice things and put some nice pieces in place, but does Shohei Ohtani see him as the difference maker from going to 82 wins to a perennial winner? Because that's what Shohei wants to do. He always wanted location and he wanted winner. So that's why when I saw that the Cubs were like in the top 3, I'm like, I was a bit shocked. I don't think they're ready to make that jump. I really don't. The Blue Jays, I can really kind of see a bit more. The Blue Jays, their farm system isn't as good as other teams in the AL East, like Baltimore, like the Rays. So I could kind of see the Toronto, like, hey, we need to get this guy. We're going to elevate our team. Plus, Shohei looking at the team, they have Bichette at shortstop. They have Guerrero at first base. They would really have a nice lineup. Plus, they did really a good job with their pitching. So the Blue Jays make a little more sense, although the location, it doesn't make sense. If you wanted a location-wise, and plus, not for nothing, the Blue Jays haven't won anything in the past either. They really haven't. And going back to the Cubs have won one time in 100 years. So, folks, I don't really get it. I don't get the Ohtani thing. If he doesn't go to the Dodgers, I don't get it at all. I really, really don't. I really don't. And if I don't get it, that means that the Mets could have signed him. If he goes to a team like the Cubs, if he goes to a team like the Toronto Blue Jays, that means the Mets were a viable option, and that means that David Stearns just put his nose up and said, "That's it. I don't want the guy." And if he doesn't want to come here, that's one thing. If you can kind of put your go in another direction and say, "Hey, I that's not my plan. That's not my plan." But knowing that the guy didn't want to come there, that's okay. I can live with that. But knowing in the back of my head that the guy would have come here, like if it comes out in a year that Shohei wanted to come to New York City and David Stearns was like, "Hey, if Shohei wasn't in the cards," that would really bother me. I'd rather us choose to go in a different direction, knowing Shohei was never coming here. All right? I would really feel like that. But just to kind of get to the Juan Soto is a totally different story. Juan Soto, for the Mets to not be interested in, I don't get at all. I don't get it at all. Now, I know he doesn't have his defense is a bit suspect, but for the Mets not to go after a 24, 25-year-old who's like a future Hall of Famer, who has the resume that Juan Soto has, who has about 10 to 12 years of dominant production, I don't get that. I mean, that's like saying you're minor leaguers right now that you're guaranteeing that they're going to be better than Juan Soto. And how could you do that? How could you do that? He's a top 3 player. I mean, I'm not saying I would give 4 or 5 of our guys away, but I would heavily consider giving 1 or 2 top 5 prospects away for Juan Soto, knowing that I have a good chance of signing him. That is the key. And whoever listens to MLB Network, they actually interviewed Steve Phillips the other day, and they asked him about trading for Juan Soto. And he said, if you trade for Juan Soto, you trade for Juan Soto to sign Juan Soto. And that's when he made mention that he signed Mike Piazza. I mean, he traded for Mike Piazza with the intention of signing Mike Piazza. And when he traded for Mike Piazza just had like 3 months left on his contract. So he even had less than a year. Juan Soto has a year left. So Steve Phillips are like, if you trade for the guy, if you give up prospect, your number one goal has to be to sign the guy. No doubt about it. And that's why I don't understand if the Mets put something together. Maybe San Diego's not interested. I know the Mets supposedly don't have as many young pitching prospects as other teams do. So if that's the situation, then possibly maybe the Mets could wait until Juan Soto goes to free agency next year. They don't have to give up any prospects, and hopefully Hopefully, Juan Soto will deal with them in free agency. If that's the plan, I can understand the plan, and I could respect that plan because that makes sense. The Mets could save their prospects and hopefully sign a guy like Juan Soto next year. And next year should give us more clarity. We should have more clarity in terms of where we're going with our rotation. Because right now, there's nobody in the rotation. There really isn't. Kodai Senga is the only guy we have and that we're building around. And by next year, Quintana and Severino, they're not going to be here. So hopefully that brings us to our next conversation in Yamamoto. Yamamoto is a guy who is being chased by essentially half the league. Half the league's chasing this guy, and I don't blame them. That you got basically a 24-year-old Japanese guy who's won their Cy Young Award 3 times, and he's a guy who doesn't come with really that much risk besides losing money. He's a younger guy, and he's very, very dominant. He's a very dominant pitcher. I was looking at all his stats, and it's just hard to believe that a guy can amass that type of resume in Japan. And Japan is like, that league is like a step down for Major League. They consider like MLB, then it's the Japanese league. So he's pitching against a lot of talented players, former MLB players. So it's not like a garbage AAA type of league. So you got to really respect the numbers. You got to respect the talent. That's the league that Kodai Senga came from. So I mean, like, we're crossing our fingers, but it looks like an uphill battle to climb considering how many teams are involved. Like, but no surprise considering the guy's age and credentials. Yeah, no, you make a really, really good point, Robbie. We got some hitters. And we got hitters coming up. I mean, we mentioned about, Ronnie Mauricio started coming up last year. Brett Beatty was extremely disappointing in my opinion, but he's still got a ton of talent. Then you got a lot of the guys that we acquired, like, Acuna, he should be coming up eventually, and you got the guys we acquired from Houston. I know Ryan Clifford's a bit younger, but we got absolutely no pitching. We have no pitching at all. I mean, looking at a minor league, I mean, you can kind of find a couple guys who have some decent talent, but there's really like no future rotation guys that you really see. And I'm just going to bring something up. So right now, it's pretty interesting. I was looking at the top prospects for the Mets. Luis Angel Acuna right now on MLB.com is actually considered their top prospect. Then Drew Gilbert, Jet Williams, Mauricio is still a prospect. Then Parada. And you're going to hear why I'm saying this. Then Ryan Clifford. Then Colin Hewitt, the shortstop. Then Marco Vargas. Then you get to the ninth player, Mike Vassell. You come to the first pitcher. And Mike Vassell is not a world beater. He did decent last year. He's got decent stuff. But, he's more like a 3-4 in a rotation. And then you have Blade Tidwell, who dropped, a couple of ticks lower. So you got a couple guys in your farm system right now, and Blade Tidwell and Mike Vassell, who really at best could be like a number 3. I mean, you really have no aces right now. And that's where when we traded away Scherzer and when we traded away Verlander, that was the only thing I was upset about. I'm like, we got to get pitching back. We absolutely have to get pitching back if we're going to sacrifice, next year and beyond with Verlander. But, that's what I was really upset about. Yeah, it's that's what it's got to be. It's 100% got to be about patience, 100%. And yeah, Senga's a number 2. So let's look at this logically right now. We have Senga as a number 2, Quintana would be our number 4. And right now, Severino would be our number 5 plus. So essentially, we don't have an ace. We don't have a number 3. And, I would want to get, probably 2 number 3s. So 2 number 3s and an ace. So that's a lot of pitching we are missing. We're missing an extremely amount of, a talent in the rotation. We don't have middle relief. And, the guys that, let's look at some of the pitchers who really are available right now, because I got a lot of opinions about that. All right, so we know we need an ace. We know that we need a 3, and we know that we need a 4 in our rotation. So basically, we need 60% of our rotation right now, plus. So obviously, Aaron Nola is off the board. Sonny Gray is off the board. Aaron Nola, and I give the Phillies credit. I want to give them credit. They didn't want to get into a bidding war. They didn't want Yamamoto to go off the clock. They didn't want Snell to go off the clock. They're like, you know what? We might be paying Nola a little more than we should. He's 30 years old. He had an over 4 under an average. Just give the guy 7 years, $172 million. And I think that was smart in that part, because a guy like Aaron Nola, if he was still out there and Snell was signed and Yamamoto was signed, all the teams that were left at the doorstep, they might have said, give Aaron Nola $200 million. So I want to give the Phillies a bit of credit with that signing. Sonny Gray was a decent signing as well. St. Louis, they haven't been good in, recent time, but they've been notoriously good at improving and good at developing pitchers. I know Sonny Gray is 34 years old. He signed a 3-year, $75 million contract, and I think that's going to be pretty solid with them. So let's see what we have kind of left on our plate. You know what? I don't like this. Okay. The more and more I look at this free agent list, and I've been looking at this list for the last month now. The more and more I look at this free agent list, the more and more I can kind of understand where David Stearns is going. I really can. When considering our payroll is $300 million, when considering we need an ace, we need a couple really top tier pitchers, and looking at the pitchers really out there, besides Yamamoto, there's really not anybody I really want to invest a lot of money in. I know Blake Snell is talented, but I just don't like the fact that the guy's so often injured. I really don't see. We've dealt with DeGrom. We've dealt with injury. If the guy's not on the field, he's obviously not going to be productive. And Blake Snell is nowhere near DeGrom. It's not like, hey, you know what? I'll sign him because I know when he's on the field, he's going to be lights out. He's not a DeGrom. So that's why I'm concerned about him. So then we'll look at the next tier guy, and, that's going to be Jordan Montgomery. And I'm going to read you some stats about Jordan. And I'm also going to go to Baseball Savant because I want to see some of the advanced numbers on Jordan. Jordan Montgomery, obviously, he was with the Yankees. He started out his career with them. Then they traded him away for Harrison Bader last year. So that was a pretty horrible trade for the Yankees. But ever since then, Jordan Montgomery has been a very solid starter. He went to Texas, and, he was one of the mainstays in the rotation. Texas didn't really have a dominant rotation, but they had a very good, solid rotation. Last year with Texas, he was 4-2 with a 2.79 earner and average. Obviously, he's a lefty. So he did really good with Texas, and he did good under the bright lights. We know he can pitch in New York. We know that he can pitch in the playoffs. We know that he can win. So that is a guy who is desirable, but he's also a guy who I don't think has that electric upside that I would be willing to pay more than $100 million. He's a guy that I would want to get him for under $100 million. If the bidding goes over $100 million for a Jordan Montgomery, then I would want to bow out immediately. That's just my opinion on it. Like, he's a very nice pitcher. But he's not a guy I don't want to invest a lot of money in. And let's really go to some advanced numbers with Jordan. I want to see what his baseball savant numbers are, where he ranks, with relation to all the other players. All right, so I'm definitely no on Blake Snell. Jordan Montgomery right now, I'm on the fence about. I would sign him if it's kind of a short term under $100 million, but like I said, it really depends on the market. I mean, and if you look at his advanced stats, his expected ERA, Jordan Montgomery for 2023 was 3.98. So that's essentially a 4 expected earn or an average. That's not good. The expected batting average against is 2.53. That's not good. His fastball velocity is in the 38th percentile. That's not good. He has a 93.3 average fastball velocity. His exit velocity is about mediocre. That's in the 66th percentile. Not bad. His chase rate, the amount of times he gets guys to chase, is not bad. It's 65. So 66 and 65 is a bit over the middle. His whiff rate is not good. It's 47. His K rate is not good. It's 34. His barrel percentage is not great. His hard hit. If you look at the advanced stats, you're looking at basically a mediocre pitcher for 2023. Yet he had good numbers. He did good with Texas. He had good results. So does this tell me as the guy ages, is he going to get better? Is he going to consistently have good results? It just tells me he seems like a guy who deserves to make around $20 million, 20 to 25, maybe seems like almost a Sonny Gray type of contract. If the Mets want to do something like that, I would do a 3-year, $75 million contract, but I don't want to go over $100 million. And I can see why David Stearns would not want to go down this route. So I'm just going to go me. I'm no for Blake Snell, and I'm really limited on Jordan Montgomery. I'm really limited. It would have to be the right contract. It would have to be the right term. Everything would have to be perfect for that to work. So, okay, so let's go to the next guy. All right, so the next option we're going to look at is Eduardo Rodriguez. And folks, I'm just looking at all these stats. Eduardo Rodriguez, I really haven't followed that at all, but I know he's been solid, but I'm going to just delve into the stats, kind of see where he is at this point in his career. He is 30 years old. He pitched with Detroit last year, and he did very well. He had a 13-9 record, 3.3 earner on average. That was his lowest earner ERA of his entire career. His ERA for his career is a 4.03. So his career earner on average is not too impressive. His career win-loss is 82 and 53, so that's pretty decent. His strikeout per 9 is 8.4, so that's more or less mediocre. His WHIP is 1.153 for last year. Overall, it's 1.29, which is essentially 1.3. So those career numbers really don't impress me. Want to see. So last year in 152 innings pitched, he gave up 56 earned runs, which is very good. Last year, he had a very good year, Eduardo Rodriguez. And, luckily it was in his free agent year. So, he'll be able to capitalize. I mean, like if he gets close to 20 million, that'll really tell you like how much of a pitcher's market this is. But, of course he's going to get over 20 million because if you look at what Sevy got 13 million. So Eduardo Rodriguez, who has been a lot more productive, is essentially going to get blow that out. So last year, if you look at Eduardo Rodriguez's advanced numbers on Baseball Savant, like we tend to do, they're not impressive at all. They're really not. So last year, his pitch distribution, just so you know, his repertoire, he used his fastball 55% of the time. 19% went to the changeup, 19% went to the cutter, and 7% went to the slider. So his bread and butter was his fastball. He has a 92 mile per hour average fastball, so he doesn't throw hard. His changeup sits around 86. He's got an 89 mile per hour cutter and an 85 mile per hour slider. So his repertoire is basically blah. It's nothing special. His expected ERA of last year was bad, 4.04. His expected batting average was a bit better, 247. Velo was horrible and in the 22nd percentile. So his chase rate's horrible. His whiff rate's horrible. He's not a strikeout pitcher. He's a guy kind of who pitches to contact. He's essentially a soft throwing lefty. His job is he tries to miss barrels. When he doesn't miss barrels, and when he doesn't miss barrels much, he basically relies on movement because he doesn't strike a lot of guys out and he doesn't throw the ball hard. So how do you see this guy really projecting over a long-term contract? I don't see him that really well based on his career numbers. Career ERA of over 4. It seemed like his whip, like I said, is 1.3. This is not a guy who I would invest in at all. I would have to say no, unless you're going to give him less money than you gave Sevy, or you're going to give him a contract around Sevy. Not much talent right there. So let's go down. Let's keep looking at this free agent list. We need to build this rotation, folks. We have Quintana right now. We have Senga. And we have Severino. So basically, we just have one guy and Quintana. So we have 2 guys in our rotation right now because Severino is off and injured. I don't count him as a viable option for the year going forward. So let's continue to look at this free agent list. Let's continue to see if we can find a pitcher that we could live with. All right. And we kind of a pitcher that I obviously would live with Yamamoto, but I think it's a long shot. Okay, so let's look at Shota Imanaga. He is an interesting option out of Japan. Now, he is the guy that actually I have highlighted here that I can live with, and I am going to go over why. Shota Imanaga is a bit of an unknown considering he pitched in Japan. But he's a guy with viable talent. He's a guy who's 29 years old. He's probably going to pitch at the age of 30. So he's a guy who's kind of like coming in like Senga did, except he's got like different stuff. He's a lefty. Last year, he pitched in, let me see how many games. He pitched for 2 teams. He had a 7-5 record. He had a 2.66 earned ERA in 24 games. His strikeout per 9 was 10.6. So that's pretty decent. 10.6 strikeout per 9. He had, this is actually really good. He averaged 1.4 walks per 9 innings. So he had a very good strikeout to walk ratio, about 11 Ks to 1 walks. So he had very good control, which right there tells me the guy has a good strikeout ratio and he has good control. That's what I like to see. That is the type of stuff that translates to the major leagues. If you have control, you can pitch in any league. Okay, so now let's look at whip. Let's look at how many hits he gave up, in the league he was in. So his WHIP was 1.01, which is, folks, that's a good WHIP. His career WHIP is 1.07. So they're not getting a lot of hits off this guy. That's what that's telling me. So this is a guy who I would, I don't know too much about the type of stuff that he has, but just based on the career numbers, he's a guy that if I can get him for the right price, I'd rather take a chance on him than an Eduardo Rodriguez. I definitely would. He's a guy I would definitely take a chance on. So if I had to compare him to a Jordan Montgomery, that's when it just comes down to money. Obviously, Jordan Montgomery has done it in the major leagues. So Jordan Montgomery, I would take him higher, but it depends on the money. If the money gets over $100 million, then I would look in Imanaga's direction. I definitely would. All right, now let's go down to look at that. The microphone went out. All right. I apologize about that. But you know what? You'd be silly, really, not to kind of consider that. It's something. If we get if he gets an offer of blue chip prospects, that's going to be something that he cannot refuse. It really can. You know what? I got to fix a couple of things. Everyone who's ever come here tonight, I really appreciate it. We're going to kind of call it quits right now. I thank you so much. Everyone have a great night. Let's go Mets. We're going to be following the free agency, the hot stove. Thank you for being with me. It's, 1:30 in the morning. It's getting late, everybody. Go to bed. The Mets will be here tomorrow. Hopefully we're going in a different direction. Hopefully something is going to be there that we don't see right now. Thank you all. Have a good night.